Welcome to the CBIA BizCast powered by Google. On this podcast, we dive into stories about Connecticut businesses.
Downs Construction actually came to my school.
And business leaders.
I think it's always also really important to be able to see a path forward.
We're shaping the future of Connecticut's economy. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amanda Marlowe, and today we are joined by Dan Wheadon. He's a partner and national leader of RSM's Industrials Consulting practice. Dan, welcome to the BizCast.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thanks for having me.
We're looking forward to this discussion today. We know that RSM has been a great partner of CBIA's and has continued to support CBIA's manufacturing report over the years. That was released at our conference back in October at the manufacturing conference. And Dan, you were there. You were part of that conference. Talk to us a little bit, just in general, about kind of the energy and what you were seeing from manufacturers there.
Yeah, no, like I said, very engaged group of panelists. I thought a really engaged audience as well. And I think many of them were faced with some of the same challenges and a lot of the challenges that the report laid out, whether that was labor shortages and challenges attracting and retaining people to, how do we leverage technology on a going forward basis to really, optimize the things that we do from an operational perspective within our organization. I thought there were some really great insights from the panelists and from the crowd, quite honestly, and was a great event. And look forward to continuing to have engagement with that group of folks and on a go-forward basis.
And Dan, we're going to get into the report a little bit more in a second, but can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? You've been working with RSM for quite some time, and specifically you've been working helping manufacturers.
Right. So as you mentioned, I lead our industrials consulting practice here in North America, which is made up of, somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 clients, anywhere from small manufacturers to multinational, multi-billion-dollar organizations. I've been in the consulting space for over 20 years and have seen a number of different challenges with our clients and the companies that I talk to on a regular basis. I have a real passion for really helping our clients sort of think through what are some of the challenges and opportunities within their business and, how can we sort of partner with our clients and have a very collaborative relationship to really help them drive performance within their organization. So as you know, and I think as most of the crowd knew, the manufacturing industry I think is really going through a pretty significant change in recent years with Industry 4.0 and number of new technologies out there, and now the emergence of AI and machine learning. And there are so many things out there in the market today that we spend a lot of time with our clients kind of thinking through, what are those things that we can utilize, whether that's technology or different business processes that we can implement within our business to really help drive performance and ultimately, help manufacturers really operate more effectively.
Yeah, and definitely on that panel at the event, we had a number of different size manufacturers. Michelle Edsel from National Graphics. We had a representative from BD, Lenny Morano from Lectra, and then our Chief Manufacturing Officer, Paul Lavoie. And they all really brought different perspectives of where they're going with innovation and how they look at it. But I think it's no secret that these companies feel that they have to innovate in order to stay relevant.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that is something that a lot of these manufacturers need to continue to think about on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis as far as, how can we be innovative? How can we be innovative for our customers and within how we develop products and bring products to market, and how do we see our own organization driving innovation internally to give a better experience to our employees, a better experience to our customers, and ultimately thrive as a business.
And that's been a challenge when you're fighting with high costs of doing business. In Connecticut, the report, one of the findings of the report was that 91% of manufacturing leaders say that they feel the cost of doing business is increasing.
Yes.
And when you're trying to innovate, that often means buying new technology and having to look at, your ROI and say, is this worth it?
Right.
So what are some of the kind of things that you've been seeing on that front?
Yeah, and I would like to say that things are not going to get more expensive, but I think us as consumers, we see that every day when you go to the grocery store and a gallon of milk is $10, right? So, I do think that if you look at some of the macroeconomic data, that inflation is sort of getting under control a little bit, right? And that's a good thing, right? And we sort of have this heightened interest rate environment now, which makes it even a little bit more challenging to deploy capital and invest in innovation, to your point. But I do think that a lot of our clients and a lot of companies out there have to just continue to sort of think about the long term, and how do we remain competitive in the environment that we are in, and how do we ultimately kind of do more with less, right? And I don't necessarily know that sounds great all the time, right? But I do believe a lot of our manufacturing clients and a lot of manufacturers out in the market are thinking about that and saying, all right, well, if I have labor challenges, how do I get around that, right? Because I still need to service my customers. I still need to, manage lead times for the delivery of product to my customers, and competition is continuously increasing, right? So how do I continue to look at what I do and try to, continuously improve and continue to sort of do better?
Yeah, and certainly that's something that so many people are really making part of their everyday decision making for leaders in this space, for sure.
Absolutely.
Another area, that we've seen, I don't think that you can have a conversation about in any industry right now without talking about workforce.
Right.
The report found that 86% of manufacturing leaders reported difficulty finding and retaining employees. And about half of them said it's really a lack of skilled workers. The people that are applying to these jobs don't have the skills that they need. What experience have you heard on that front, and how are manufacturers facing that?
Yeah, and I think you've probably heard some innovative things on the panel, whether that's partnering with local trade schools to identify operators that are on the manufacturing floor, right? Because I think as you look at a somewhat aging workforce in the space, right? I think part of the challenge is how do we replace those people as they move towards retirement age and no longer working, and that has been a real challenge. So I think engagement with local trade schools and things like that from an operator's perspective is really important. And the state of Connecticut, I think thinking about how to incentivize some of that from a state perspective, and incentivizing both the schools and sort of the organizations, in how do we build more of a skilled workforce on a going forward basis. And how is work changing as well, right? The way that we produced a widget, 10 or 15 or 20 years ago is much different than, how we produce that widget today. And it's going to be much different in how we produce that in 10 years, right? So what does sort of that big picture look like? And what type of a skilled workforce do we need in order to sort of support that, right? And how do we, provide the appropriate training for our people? How do we really educate them on being, really, really flexible? And, if they're working on a production floor, I can operate XYZ machine and I can operate ABC machine, and I am not just a specialist in one area. So, being able to sort of flex the workforce a little bit, cross train across multiple different areas, I think is really critical for a number of our clients, and will continue to be into the future. And really, and again, I kind of harp on sort of some of the technology components, but I do think it's very important. You mentioned return on investment before, and I do think that as these new technologies continue to come up and continue to drive innovation and throughput and efficiency and a number of our manufacturers, we really need probably a little bit more of a skilled workforce as you look forward to leveraging some of these technologies.
Yeah, and I think Paul Lavoie had spoken about that as well. But he said, we're not going to be able to fill all these jobs. So how can we use new technologies to help make these processes more efficient?
Yes.
We have to come to the stark reality that we are never solving the workforce problem with people. How do I use machines to do the work for the people I'm never going to have available to hire?
And is that kind of something that you're seeing your clients kind of work into their plans, their efficiency?
Yeah, every day, right? Because you have a finite workforce to a certain extent, right? And you have a finite number of people who are actually able to work in any industry, not just manufacturing, but any industry, right? So, if demand, it's basic, economics, right? As demand goes up and the supply of labor is the same, how do you kind of, bridge that gap? And, the answer is technology, right? But the question for many of our clients is, where do I invest that capital? In what types of technologies? And how is that going to help me service my customers better, right? And that's a conversation that I have multiple times a day with clients, not only in the manufacturing space, but really across every industry.
And there's so many options out there, right? If you're looking at this like one new machine, or changing this process, well, you've got a lot of options to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And and then add on to that with new technology comes a lot more data, right? So you have a lot more data that in theory is going to provide you with the insights that you can be more predictive and in really planning your production and how you're sort of servicing your customers. But what we see a number of times with many of our clients is that they do have a lot of this data, but not necessarily the skill set or the expertise in translating that data into actionable items where they can take that information and utilize it to make decisions within their business and to really drive performance from an operational perspective.
And I think with that data term, we also have been hearing a lot more about artificial intelligence, right? Yeah. Not as many, I think, small manufacturers are using them, but we are hearing some of the bigger ones. BD talked about it on the panel.
I think in BD, we are looking at more efficient and effective ways to collect and analyze data, you know, coming off our machines, tons of data, downtime data, fault data, scrap data, all of that stuff.
You know, we've been using it. We just need to get to that point where we can take the data. Are your clients diving into the AI sector as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are similar to some of the panelists, kind of trying to figure out what is an appropriate use case of artificial intelligence for my business, and how can that help me, again, sort of achieve the goals of the business, right? So I think Lenny used an example of you know, where they use artificial intelligence to predict machine maintenance in the field.
With AI, we could very quickly analyze that data to predict future failures. So we have customers out in the field that will literally get a part from us and saying, hey, this motor just showed up. I have no idea why. Well, because we saw that it was running hot for the last 3 days through our, you know, our automated analytics engine, we knew that that part's probably going to fail a week from now, so we got it out to you ahead of time.
Yeah. So really eliminating any downtime for some of these machineries, that is very central to a lot of these customers' ability to, you know, deliver product to their customers, right? So I think the ability of AI to kind of accommodate for that and be in what you'd call sort of preventative maintenance, and really, you know, driving decisions in that manner, you know, have a lot of positive impacts for their customers.
Yeah, it's certainly another tool that has came into the game very quickly, and you know, manufacturers now have to figure out, where am I going to use this before we're too late to the game?
Exactly. And that's you know, that's one technology, right? That is sort of the term of the year, right? Artificial intelligence, and in 3 years maybe it's going to be something different, right? But I think the overarching kind of commentary that I would have here is that you have to continuously think about how you're improving your operations, right? Whether that is through technology, whether that is through changing business process, whatever that may be. I think just having a focus on how do we continuously improve the way that we do things so that we can service our customers more effectively is something that all organizations should really be focused on.
And continuous improvement is really embedded into all manufacturing facilities. It's obviously something that, you know, needs to happen, like you mentioned. But how do you think the past couple of years, specifically going through the pandemic, dealing with supply chain inflation, has really kind of reinvigorated this for manufacturers?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point, because I think that, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic and COVID, a lot of our clients were struggling, right? And they kind of didn't know what to do. And, you know, I would say that, you know, many of them had historically put off technology investments for whatever reason, right? Because they are large investments sometimes, and you know, it's sometimes hard to kind of pull the trigger and make the decision to invest X amount of dollars in this new technology. But you know, I think what the pandemic really did was kind of shine a light on the fact that you have to continuously be looking at these technologies and how it can help to drive, you know, operational efficiency. And so what I would say is sort of through the pandemic, it helped many companies out there sort of kind of rethink how they evaluate some of these technology investments. And, you know, it's no longer kind of a nice to have, but more of a, you know, I have to have this, right?
Yeah, and I think another topic, you know, we didn't really touch on. We touched on a little bit in the panel, but that the report found, no surprise, supply chain issues are still lingering. what do you think that manufacturers are getting better at dealing with the problems, or are predicting it? Even though we're still in a place where it's hard to predict when you've got, something that used to take 3 weeks to come in and it is now taking 8 months.
Sure. Yeah. I think if we were having this conversation probably 2 years ago, those supply chain challenges were much more impactful than they are today, right? I think we've seen that ease up a little bit, right? I think you've seen sort of the cost of transportation come down, things like that sort of went through the roof during COVID have sort of normalized to, I'd say, more historical norms, over the last year, 18 months. So, but from a supply chain perspective, I think that, some of the challenges are real, right? Obviously, I'm sure there are many manufacturers in Connecticut that have either operations in China or they're sourcing products in China, and that is a challenge to say the least. And what I've seen a number of our clients do is really rationalizing kind of their supply chain and evaluating, is it the right move for us to really be sourcing all of what XYZ raw material or subcomponent from China, or should we diversify our supply chain a bit to kind of de-risk our business a little bit? So that is again another question and another conversation that I have on a pretty consistent basis with a number of clients to say, what are our alternatives, right? Where can I source products or some of these sub-assemblies from that, I'm not, dependent on getting product from China and then having some of these, lead time issues with my suppliers. So, I do think that it's probably good business practice to continuously sort of look at, supplier performance. How are they, delivering on time and in full? And, from a cost perspective, am I able to sort of manage those costs and really effectively, again, drive, operational improvement in my business?
Yeah. And there's a number of companies that are reshoring at this time.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. We see that. And I was just working with another client recently that is sort of evaluating reshoring. They're looking to, increase capacity in the production of some of their product lines. They don't want to increase capacity in China, so they're evaluating, all right, can I bring this to really North America, right? Whether it's in the U.S. or whether it's in Mexico, where there are some really good opportunities from a manufacturing perspective to leverage. So, that is something that I think a number of our clients are looking at pretty continuously.
Yeah, certainly. And we've seen so many companies, even here in Connecticut, say, okay, we're expanding our facilities because the part that we used to make overseas, we're now going to make right here because we can get it out the door sooner. And we have our supply, the supply chain is right here in the state, specifically, for those aerospace companies where Connecticut has a pretty big, aerospace alley for sure.
Yes. Absolutely.
And, just kind of in general, as you think about where companies have come in this past year, a lot of Connecticut manufacturers did, in fact, turn profits this year, which is certainly a positive. But what do you foresee for the near future? Companies continuing to look at these investments and efficiencies?
As we talked about, right, we're sort of in this inflationary environment. We sort of see that coming down a little bit. Hopefully, as that continues to come down, interest rates begin to come down as well. So I think at that point, we start to ask ourselves the question of how do we effectively deploy capital, right? Because our cost of capital is going to be a little bit lower, hopefully. And, where should we invest? And again, going back to the technology component, where should we invest to, account for all the things we're talking about, whether they're labor shortages or, how do I kind of improve on, my customer service with my clients, and, how do I continue to sort of manage lead times and make them more attractive to our clients and customers, and how do we continue to remain competitive. So I would imagine over the next year, as those interest rates hopefully start to come down, you see a little bit more again investment from an innovation perspective within our manufacturing base of companies, and truly looking towards how do we continue to stay competitive, continue to grow, while at the same time dealing with some of these other challenges from a labor shortage perspective, right? And how do I evaluate new operating models from a supply chain perspective, and how do I evaluate opportunities within my supply chain to ultimately provide a better product to our customers in a quicker manner, and really staying ahead of the game and staying competitive.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I want to kind of just, end our conversation like we always do on this podcast, and, talk about some leadership lessons. Dan, you manage a team at RSM, but also, spend a lot of time working with teams, within manufacturers and other companies. Anything that you kind of really go to, or lessons that you've really learned in the past couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot, and I continue to learn a lot. And I'm a big advocate of sort of collaboration and teamwork, and two minds is better than one, and three is better than two, right? So, I do think that from a leadership perspective, we really have an opportunity to really in continuously, and I've said this a number of times today, but really continuously enhance how we do things, right? Whether that's me working with my teams on a day-to-day basis, or whether that's me working with my clients on a day-to-day basis. But how do we kind of critically evaluate whether that's opportunities within our business or issues within our business, and how do we work as a team to come to the right answer for whether it's my own organization or whether that's one of my clients' organizations.
Manufacturing is kind of a collaborative environment where you bring a whole group of people. You bring engineers, you bring accountants, you bring production, you bring customer service, you bring all sales, you bring procurement all together to kind of solve problems.
I'm a big advocate of sort of that, teamwork and collaboration approach, and really sharing insights and information across, our client base, and, from client to client for us, right? I mean, this is the business that, I've been in for, over 20 years. And, I continuously am kind of amazed at the ability of our people and our clients' people to come up with innovative solutions at all levels of the organization, right? And so some of the best ideas I've ever seen have come from very low levels of the organization, and people just kind of raising their hand and saying, hey, have we ever thought about doing this a different way, right? And kind of challenging the status quo a little bit. And, us as leaders just kind of being open to listening, right? And to kind of hearing some of that feedback and input from people, because, ultimately at the end of the day, whether it's, me leading a team of consultants, or whether it's our manufacturing clients really trying to service their customers, I think that sort of, collaboration and thought leadership and idea generation really is what, drives innovation across the economy. So, something that I'm pretty passionate about in working with teams, and something that I continue to sort of stress for our teams. And it's like when you're at the airport, like if you see something, say something, right? And I do think that's a really important component to driving high performing teams and high performing organizations, is that sort of there's really no hierarchy, no borders, right? I think it is something that I've tried to kind of really focus on my entire career. So
yeah, certainly. Sometimes the quietest person in the room has that idea that's brewing. They just need
sure,
to be listened to.
yeah, right. They
And it
need the
takes a good leader
platform,
to
and yeah,
acknowledge it.
they need the platform, and they need the encouragement to be able to sort of raise their hand and and provide their insights, because I do think that a lot of those opinions and thoughts and ideas are extremely valuable.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on this week's BizCast, and for, to RSM for continuing to be a supporter of CBIA's manufacturing report every year.
Great. Thank you very much, Amanda. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to this week's BizCast. You can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review and let us know if you have ideas for a future podcast. And for more episodes, head on over to CBIA.com.